And let me get my notes. All right, we're on. So welcome to Map for Engineers.
My pleasure.
Yeah, Alvar, maybe you want to introduce yourself. I know you need no introduction in Estonia. Everyone knows you. But I think 5 minutes, just where you're coming from, which companies you worked in, which roles would be a nice start.
Whenever I try to do this, I usually don't know whether to start from the end or the beginning, but I'll then just start from the beginning this time around.
Sure.
So I guess it's worth saying that my close contact with computers, I guess, was heavily enabled by the fact that both of my parents were in IT or adjacent fields back in their uni, and when I was 10 years old, 12 years old, we oftentimes had like some sort of a computer at home even, and there was no YouTube back then, and not really any social media either. So that meant I took any opportunity to try some coding. I even don't know where that exactly started or what that came from.
How old were you, more or less?
I guess, first days, first times, maybe around 11-ish, 12-ish. I remember some tidbits. So that was around the time when every Estonian had some friends in Finland for a reason or another. And I remember, I think it was my mother who was doing some collaboration with some Finns, and then one of them had some leftover home computer, which was basically like kind of like a tabletop, but also sort of like a laptop thing made by Casio, which had a keyboard, and then an LCD screen of what might that have been, 160 times 64 pixels, and it had two sort of main modes. One was sort of like a spreadsheet type of thing, and the other was sort of like basically a basic interpreter. And it also came with a book of like code prints, like literally, like code listings. And there was a couple of games, and there was like, anyway, some kind of stuff like that.
Games on a terminal.
But like, anyway, there was like some LCD, some graphical. I mean, you could do graphics anyway. So I remember, basically over time, I obviously typed in all of these. I think there was like a bowling game, and then there was even some sort of like a golf game. I can't. I mean, that sounds weird in hindsight, but anyway, it was there. So I truthfully just went and tried to type those all in line by line. Line number, instruction, line number, instruction.
What was the language?
Basic. Yeah. And then whenever you made a typo, then the interpreter told you like a little bit later maybe. So anyway, that's like just something I remember from my sort of early days with computers. So in that sense, but I'm not saying it was obvious that I got into computers later, but anyway, I definitely think it paved the way. And I had some early jobs as well in, I guess, like sort of general IT stuff. And then I think like the first job I properly got for myself, as in like found for myself, was actually just doing some general IT support for a magazine publisher. Like no coding, nothing whatsoever. It was just working with fun people and then helping them with computers. But then I reckon that it would be like fair to say my first sort of proper coding job was after the army service. So I kind of got back, and a friend of mine had effectively again made some Finnish friends, and then we were basically doing sort of like subcontracting for a Finnish development house. So yeah, we did some fun stuff. We helped Nokia Networks set up their software development stack to install faster with fewer CDs, that sort of projects. Okay. But then sometimes...
So Nokia contracted you?
Contacted the Finnish company who then, hired some cheap Estonian guys. But from there on, I guess I really like got into coding more and more. So the Finnish thing went bust somehow, and I joined another friend who was by accident working in Hansa Bank, now Swedbank, and then I spent about 8 years in there, and I really think that was. I really think that was the sort of part of my career when I really sort of actually grew into, sort of actually became a programmer.
Yeah.
So
you worked with Anton Keks in Hansa Bank?
Yeah. There was Anton Keks and Erik Jõgi and some other luminaries in the Estonian coding ecosystem. But that's where I met Anton too. And in Swedbank anyway, I really sort of appreciate that period, because I think I learned a lot about like sort of just actual system programming, basically how do you build software that matters. Yes. That matters. But I also managed to pick up some team lead responsibilities, so I got my taste of people work around that time too. But then, I think like there was this Swedbank, whatever, takeover, things were changing, structures were changing, and for many political reasons, a bunch of people, Anton among them, decided to start a company called Codeborn that many Estonians have heard of as well.
And you were part of that, right?
Yes, I was sort of part of the initial team. I wasn't one of the founders, but I was part of the initial team, and then I spent 3 years at Codeborn. I mostly worked on a telco project, just with a single customer, which was just interesting, but also led me to understand that I'm a bit of a product guy by heart. So the contracting or this, basically selling hours wasn't kind of my thing. I guess I wanted to,
because they give you already the scope requirements, right? You don't own the product.
That's one thing, but that's sort of like, that's a question of like when in this sort of overall kind of, how do we call it? Like basically, when in the cycle do you get to say your piece?
Yes.
Like,
and that was not enough in the contract.
Yes, true, but also it was just around kind of like being closer to or like kind of like owning it a bit more, just not in terms of like input, but also in just basically whether it's like skin in the game or something, in that regard as well. I was kind of like looking for more, and that's sort of a side quest, but I was also part of this kind of like founding or setup committee of a master's program called DDVE, or Design and Development of Virtual Environments. Very lofty. Basically, we're sort of starting like a startup master's program. It's a longer story, but definitely we also focused a lot around lean startup, very sort of like iterative mindset, et cetera. And I guess that also may have helped a little bit, to get my thinking going. Like, that sounds really cool.
It was master's in Tartu University?
It was actually master's under the Viljandi Culture Academy. Well, anyway, academy project, whatever, grants and stuff. Long story, but and all in all, I guess what's worth mentioning is that the lectures took place in Tehnopol in Mustamäe, literally about 10 meters down the hall from TransferWise office back then. And lo and behold, who would have guessed?
You got in the right time.
A little bit later, I found out that I knew Taavet from before. We've actually spent a semester in uni together with Taavet Tindrikus back in 99. I knew him from before, and I knew some other guys who had joined TransferWise by then, and it just really seemed to be up my alley. I didn't consider FinTech to be this like super interesting, particularly sexy field specifically, but I felt that this option is right here, so why don't I try and get into the startup world? And after a few months of trying to get in, to be honest, but as in early startups, as many people, startuppers usually know, you're so busy sawing that there's not a lot of time to sharpen the saw occasionally, or like you have so much work that you don't pay attention to hiring that much. So anyway, I started in TransferWise at 2013. And then, there's probably quite a few books that could be written about that journey. you being in many chapters in those ones as well. But anyway, yeah, I guess that's something we can zoom in on later. But after some years, my daughter was born, and I definitely felt that like early stage, super busy startup, oftentimes for people, myself included, is sort of this number one thing that your thoughts come back to whenever you're idling, for instance. And then when you get a child, that changes suddenly.
Yeah.
And I guess also, I had definitely gone through very different development phases of the company by that time. There was this amicable understanding from both ends that maybe it's a good time to step aside, just because my heart wasn't quite there.
Can you briefly mention which roles or what did you do in this?
TransferWise never really was too big about roles, but basically I applied to be sort of an engineering lead. I definitely for the first couple of months just shipped stuff and sort of like got into things. But as the team was growing, I did get into leadership roles as well. I overall I really went pretty far and wide across the product over time. I spent some time with conversion and experience teams. I then I looked after the KYC teams, AML, EDD, sanction screening, and later on, what I personally find to have been this sort of really kind of like educative and very sort of very much of a learning experience was building up the platform team, which, well, in TransferWise meant basically infrastructure and dev experience and that sort of stuff. So I effectively grew that from about 2 people to about 40, at which time it was a good moment to hire some adult supervision. So actually find somebody who'd done it before. Anyway, but then when I think that was then 2020-ish, so after 7.5 years at TransferWise, I figured it's time to do something new, and then we started Grünfin, which I can speak about it in past tense now, which was consumer-friendly, super simple portfolio management, investment service, providing portfolio management services for people, and we then applied a green, sustainable lens on our investments.
That was the main mission, right?
That was the main mission, yes. So first, like making it easy and accessible to do this sort of good kind of investing, as in regular, diversified, also semi-hands-off in terms of not having to worry about picking stocks and that sort of stuff. But we didn't manage to get it growing, long story short. So we closed it down late last year, and now, as of today, 2 weeks and 1 day in Lightyear.
Nice. Thanks. That was quite a hell of an introduction, in a good sense, because you have a lot of experience. And it's interesting because you worked, I was writing down where you worked, and you managed to work in companies of different sizes and different nature. So Codeborn being contracting, right? Hansa Bank being a bank, and also a very big one, right? So very large and corporate. Then Wise, which grew from early stage to middle stage to late stage, right? And became a unicorn and now decacorn. Grünfin, super early stage, again, building from scratch. And Lightyear, what is it, post-series, I don't know, AB kind of mid-stage.
Series A, let's say, yeah.
So mid-stage as well, I guess, would be fair enough to say. How would you say, my first question maybe is, and we can talk from different sides, like as engineering lead, as engineer, but what kind of trade-offs do you have to make, let's say even as engineer, right? If we talk from the engineering lens, being in these different companies, right? Because all of them are important for society, you could even say. And it's not right maybe to say that it's better to work in one kind of company than the other. So everyone finds what's best for them. But what are the main trade-offs that you see when you have to actually switch gears when you join like one type of company or the other?
It even might be a little bit hard for me to speak about the banking experience, just because it was also like a very formative time for myself, and basically just kind of like trying to figure out what I like and what I'm good at, and so on and so forth. That said, however, I actually think it was also like a really good environment for just learning the ropes of the trade.
Hansa Bank.
And I think I was really lucky to have had very inspiring craftsmen around me who definitely instilled me with the, well, I would now say proudly, right kind of values, right, as opposed to just whatever the corporate culture might have been, like it could have been different in also different organizations or even different departments.
Yeah.
But that said, I think having like a stable environment, reasonable paycheck, well-defined expectations, I think, just kind of becoming better at your trade, I don't think that's necessarily like a bad place to be.
Yes.
And like over time, I understood that's just not for me because of the flip side, that also there's oftentimes less independence, less, I mean, you kind of, you get to say your piece a bit later in the whole product development cycle. And, so in like for myself today, it's just a bit boring, but when you really don't maybe know too well what you're doing, it also can be, just encouraging. So that's I think around that phase. I think from the contracting angle, what's really cool, and I really sort of happily say this, I think, you definitely get a variety of projects. You get to work with different industries, different verticals, different customers, just in terms of like different kinds of people. And that can all be really interesting for a technology professional. Basically,
touch different domains.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I think for somebody for whom software development is their trade or their craft, hat tip to the craftsmanship movement, I think that's like a really good environment to thrive in, just because you basically get to take your trade to different customers and do your best to sort of promote their goals. And then again, on the flip side, it's their goals. And usually you necessarily, you can have like, and like Codeborn has spoken about this publicly in many times and then many formats. So I can kind of sort of refer to that I think they're doing a really good job in supporting and rewarding their talent. But inevitably, in that contracting type of model, the skin in the game and the potential sort of leverage or upside as an individual contributor that you may have as an IC is anyway limited, right? Compared with equity in the product company.
Yes.
So I think that's sort of the flip side, and and sort of that sounds like, sounds like it's all about money, which it obviously isn't. But that's just like the downside of the model, if that's something one would consider.
Yeah. Because also, right, let's say if you consider even like Wise at the time, right, maybe now the situation changed, but when Wise was small, you definitely had, let's say, mid-market salary or even below market, but on the upside you had equity, which is a high-risk kind of trade-off.
Absolutely.
Which is not okay for some people, but it's very rewarding for other people because you have skin in the game, right? And you get to own the product and take this risk kind of.
And I guess, like coming to now, like sort of working in a startup as a case study, right? Then the one of the upsides, as we're talking about the financial upside, and definitely, not a granted upside, but you potentially have a really high upside. The other good bit is that in a sort of like in an organization with good values and strong people, you often both feel and actually can influence that upside. You definitely come to work thinking that your work matters, and you will feel it when we all succeed. We're all going to feel it.
Yes.
But that's like the financial bit. Coming to this sort of more like a professional bit, I think startups are a great place for generalists, maybe. For people who are not afraid of the unknown too much, both in terms of kind of like what's ahead of them in the sense of like tasks, for instance, but also in the sense of just volatility in their environment, right?
Yes.
So there's a lot of change constantly happening,
All the time.
Depending on the person, it can be horribly scary or impossibly exciting, right? Yes. and we all just need to pick which is it.
Yes.
And I think, on the other side, the impossibly exciting part is that the way I like to think about it is that usually whenever a person joins a startup, especially if it's sort of like a growing startup, there's usually more work than there are people.
Absolutely.
And that means that oftentimes the one who wants can shape their influence and impact, the way you please. Yes. Probably you join to fill a role, to do sort of something, or to take responsibility of something.
Yeah, there's plenty to take
but there's exactly. But there's usually more, or like you can kind of like shape your influence to fit your character and personality and
rather than, let's say, in a bank where you're like in some specific role and it's very hard to kind of.
And you may have excellent ideas, but nobody listens because it's sort of not your mandate, right?
Yeah.
So that's, I think, like kind of motivationally speaking, probably one of the biggest upsides of startup life.
And in terms of skills, if we talk about, let's say, skills that, let's say, you have an interview in bank versus early or mid-stage startup. And as we know, maybe in early or mid-stage startups, they would ask you a lot about, are you able to, figure out what to build? So it's not about how you build it necessarily, which anyway is a given that you need to know how to build things well, but it's also about, can you figure out what to build next, right? Can you figure out what will be the next impactful thing for the company, and then iterate and then do it over and over again in a repeatable fashion? Do you think that's also one of the big differences in terms of skill sets?
I do, and I would maybe zoom out even a little bit further and say that when you interview for a mature company overall, or like a corporate or something, you usually do interview for skills. Like that's just kind of number one. Because the company is usually in a phase where their like systems, their architecture, their processes are more or less well defined. Yes. And they need people to solve either like problems in a particular domain, or somehow otherwise, take care of some particular domain. Or maybe enable some specific kind of growth, but sort of the same vibe. And when you join a startup or otherwise like a more early stage company, oftentimes you don't necessarily even know, like in the end, what's the kind of broad picture is going to look like, and hence you need to hire people who are ready to figure it out and take responsibility. Basically, you hire people for attitude. And what you said before, kind of to add on top of that, you also need a bit of like customer empathy, and then just kind of like basically being a problem solver by nature, where the solution might not be limited to your existing skill set, right? So it might be something completely new, but you're still going to need to solve the problem. Yeah. Hence, I want to see people who are kind of like ready to take the problem and figure it out.
I want to ask you something. When you were in Wise and you were engineering lead in Wise, what kind of environment you wanted to build in terms of, we talked about, right, kind of engineers that are in startups, but maybe which kind of values and principles that were really important in your opinion that you wanted to instill in this like early phases and going forward that you knew is very important for the success, and as engineering lead you knew you had to kind of lead the way to make sure you shape the environment where those values and principles thrive?
I think it may have changed a little bit over time, although I think like what I said before, like the ability to take responsibility and figure things out effectively remained the same. I think one of the key things really was I actually think I probably quite many times I've even asked this in an interview that it's sort of like cool that, okay, let's imagine you come to work on a Monday and your product manager is ill, is just out. Right, so what are you going to do? Well, okay, I'm probably going to go and take the next ticket from the backlog. Cool, okay. So, well, let's imagine he's ill for a week. So what are you going to do? Well, yeah, usually there's also like some bug backlog. Okay, cool, fine. Like when you actually run out of that work, so like what are you then going to do? And, like effectively, obviously, like the right answer is that, well, like, yeah, so look, by looking at the data, it appears that our customers may have this or that problem or, like anyway, so trying to figure out where the actual customer pain is and then trying to solve that first. And obviously it easily may be that, that pain is already reflected in the backlog, but, exactly. That thinking, what do you do? What do you do when this crystallized to-do list runs out? I think that really was number one. And I think speaking of the wise example, one thing that did come to mind that I found myself later on kind of considering quite often was also like, how do you work in the team and work in the organization of maybe conflicting priorities or other opinionated people. Effectively, that's about depends a bit on the role maybe, but still like how do you carry your point across? Like how do you do discussions and debates and because basically the quality of the discussions oftentimes results or sort of translates into the quality of our decisions.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe less so in early days, just because also usually when it's like teams are smaller and everybody knows each other, sort of like social stuff just works smoother somehow because you know each other. But yeah, later that came into play too.
Which kind of things affected you to shape, let's say, what you discussed so far, especially about this interview, hypothetical questions, what if PM gets out? It's pretty much about product engineering culture, right? I wonder if we go on other layers of abstraction, let's say, things that still relate to code quality, right? Because in the startup, you had to move fast, but you still had to ensure that there are some certain, I call it the lowest bar of quality you have to adhere to, right? And what was that for you? Did you have to instill some practices for that? For example, did you guys promote TDD or some, let's say, what was the testing strategy, methodology, or principles around that? And how did you have to, let's say, make some light touches on the on the engineering?
Like early TransferWise days, or like
early and then as it grew?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, it's yours. Oh, this is fine. Don't worry about that.
I did put it. Did put it on.
Yeah, this is fine. Yeah. So, by the way, you can answer if you want to.
No, I'm actually good. I'm trying to put it on do not disturb. I can't find it.
It's all good.
Should have some glasses as well, just to.
No, it's fine. I'm actually now trying to even refine my question. So yeah, right. Let's say what I mean. Yeah, actually, it's even good that there was a pause because I can rephrase my question. Wise is a fintech, right? And you deal with money. So it needs to have a certain level of quality, right, to it. So how did you ensure that? Like, how did you hit the balance of a team running fast, but at the same time having a culture of we own the quality of the software and we're responsible for it to be, to have certain stability.
Mm-hmm. I think with that question, I think it's worth also considering. Well, I guess it always is worth considering what do we mean when we talk about quality.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that actually originates in the end from like the angles of risk management and business processes, and basically for a company moving money, the things we probably want to care about are, we want to make sure it always goes to the right place. We want to make sure that none of it somehow just goes amiss, etc. And around that, probably we will anyway have some sort of safeguards, sort of like safeguards in principle and in process that we probably, just in order to scale them, automate them, and mitigate some people risk, decide to bake into software.
Okay.
And then what that would mean is that like we need to know like that we always have this last line of defense, effectively understanding whether what we're seeing on our bank accounts is right, and whether we see the same number in our systems, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So in that sense, we kind of like need very simple, basic, even like quick safeguards. How do we reconcile the real world with our software? And then we can sort of start
real-time safeguards, right? That would like
yeah, I mean, exactly. Like companies can do that slightly differently, but it's basically you just probably would have to decide what sort of basically what you can allow or what you can permit.
It depends on the context.
Right? Yeah, it depends on the context probably. And then I guess from there you really can start kind of coming, sort of building back from that end goal through maybe more specific test cases, maybe some other like sort of automations, maybe some jobs that just do nothing but check some numbers in the background. And obviously, like basically you build these layers of safeguards, and in the end you end up in the good old place of whatever, like unit test suite, for instance, where you just kind of, basically it's still in the end it's still like layers of risk management.
Yes.
And you just want to, just for efficiency's sake, you want to catch the issues earlier. And then that your business is not going to break because you actually have, well, maybe if not like humanized, then at least some
absolutely
some foolproof thing in the end that you can sort of come back to.
I would even it's a very good point, and I would even call it also test-driven development, because if you think about it, what is test-driven development, right? Test-driven development is not about unit tests, right? I mean, it could be, but it's not necessarily. It means you design your software by thinking about the test first, but the test in this instance, it could be thinking, how do I test my system, right? How do I verify my system? And as you said, first you build the safeguards, and then, well, everything else is reverse engineered from that.
And sometimes you design your code slightly differently to help with testing, to make it more testable.
Yes.
And in the reconciliation case, you actually just might want to expose that number that you want to see in your bank account by the end of the day, right?
Yes.
And in that regard, I quite agree that it's effectively just basically closing the loop, right? Like you just want to be able to close the loop on like super broad level, but then also during the day, and then maybe like some smaller numbers, etc.
But do you feel you had to hire and kind of filter people who would care about this quality, who would care about, let's say, exactly thinking about how will we test things in whatever level, right?
I think when building a financial system, for instance, and there are probably other verticals like that, you need to have that mindset available, or basically you need to have people in your team who care about that. Doesn't necessarily mean like all your engineers need to really really get excited about financial mathematics, right? It's probably never going to happen anyway, but it's amazing if you have a few people who do. and I think, you know, like in broad terms, I to be honest can't maybe think of like any single specific case, but yeah, maybe in Wise case we actually set up like a whole separate team who even in the beginning if I recall correctly, didn't have any developers embedded, right? That only happened later. So the whole like financial accounting, there was much more about like data quality and actually just figuring stuff out in the beginning. And then, you know, at some point you understand, first of all, you need to automate a little bit more. And then at some point you also realize much of the quality issue arises from, you know, like upstream basically. That then but I think that actually sort of also like vouches for the idea that first you start from the numbers and then you start applying tech to the problem.
By the way, you know what was my first introduction to TDD? You won't believe it. Do you know who introduced me to TDD? Kristo Kuskur.
Oh wow!
And you do know how? It was a really funny story. So when I got onboarded to Wise, it was 2015. Jordan, I think, went on vacation. So it was kind of this case, like, what do you do when others are on vacation? But actually, he did a really genius thing. He said, no, just go first week to one team. And I went to conversion team, I think, for 1 week. And I was coding there. And then next week, go to some other team. And I went to, I forgot what was the team, something about payments, maybe currencies or whatever. Krista was there. And, you know, I sat with him, so I kind of paired with him. And he said, okay, we have a bug. Let's look at the bug. And I was like, okay, let's fix it. He was like, no. Let's first write a failing test, you know. I was like, whoa. And then he explained me the TDD and everything. And he said me an interesting thing. He said to me, you know, I first, back in my time, I thought the TDD sucks. He said I was really against it, but then I really liked it and I embraced it. But I just mentioned the TDD because I view it as a tool in the toolbox, right? Sometimes it's useful, sometimes not. I mean, the mindset is, I would say, always useful to think about exactly test-driven or strategy, make your architecture testable. I think these are indispensable skills that are actually must-have for all engineers. I mean, whether you talk about pure red-green refactor loop, that's a different question. But what's your, just again, since we talk about testing, what's your take on TDD and its usefulness in the industry as a whole?
I think I definitely think there are scenarios where I use it for sure, and then I think very same. You know, let's start the bug fix from a failing test and so on. I think that's my sort of really most common use case for TDD. On the other hand, I fully admit that in sort of over the course of like general development, I definitely make sure that my code is covered with tests. But on the other hand, I actually don't do TDD. Maybe, you know, like I think in some cases where it's about, you know, like handling some different types of data or some corner cases, or then effectively it kind of, you know, becomes TDD like that. You define sort of like a bunch of outcomes, inputs and outputs basically, and then you work towards that. But it's more like let's say more like an organic way of doing it rather than methodical.
Yes.
And I think the reason for that is that, and like I'm definitely not saying that I'm right, but I think the intuition comes from the fact that that for me it seems that decent test coverage adds more value than following TDD sort of methodically. And I think so basically the step sort of, you know, from the classical TDD methodology, the thing that I do not do is then, you know, basically keep the tests and delete the code and start from scratch, right? That's what I leave undone. And I definitely incur some debt, sort of design debt, because of not doing that. But I also think like that's probably anyway, but yeah, like could be a deeper topic, and I think part of the reason is that usually also nowadays the units of code that I work with are relatively small, maybe. Basically from the unit test perspective, you actually generally operate either like with one class, or okay, maybe it's like an integration test, maybe there's like a few more, but kind of like it doesn't. The sort of like a design question of whether I would be doing it very differently just doesn't come up that much.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess it's a bit of a fluffy answer, but that's the point.
That's good. And by the way, because I worked in medical tech before, as you know, in better medicine, and I had to establish some standards in terms of how we what's our mindset about quality. Because when you create a medical imaging software, you better not make mistakes. But my main kind of philosophy was, whether you do TDD or not, you need to have a full confidence in your code so you can release it, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of also comes, I view it as stages, the criticality of software and the confidence you need to have. And the more critical the software, the higher the confidence you should get, right? So if you touch any core system, your confidence should be top-notch. And usually the way to get this confidence is by running some kind of automated tests. And why automated? Because, again, you don't want to have regressions next time you refactor or touch this, right? But I think usually for me, this mindset or talking about it like this has been very helpful, because it avoids this talking about TDD dogma or not, but it kind of talks about the outcome. You want to be confident. And as a team also, I think you want to be confident in the code.
But I think exactly, like I think usually, or like anyway, when I was first exposed to TDD, probably 20 years ago or something, I think I think unit testing and TDD for me, just I guess because of the people I used to hang out with at work at the time, I think it kind of it almost was the same thing, and actually it's not. And actually even nowadays, like when some people say TDD, they simply mean writing unit tests.
Yeah, but it's not.
Exactly, yes. It's not, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think in that regard, exactly, like I think I occasionally use TDD. I definitely believe in unit tests and automated tests even more so. But yeah.
I want to switch gears and ask you about your engineering leadership experience as a whole. If you were to write a book about engineering leadership, what would be the chapters? Mainly my question is like, what do you like, if you had to share with the industry or with any engineering leads or the upcoming ones, what would be the main kind of things you would want to share with people that you think are important to focus on?
I really never have thought about that. So in that context, I think one is there are probably like two broader sections. One being, like how do you get by with yourself as a lead, usually coming from a specialist background. All the imposter syndrome and everything around it. And when I say that, I think like sort of like how do you actually how do you manage your time? How do you manage your own motivation? How do you, what sort of expectations do you have towards your results as a lead? And I'll zoom into that a little bit. And then the other side is more like like working with people, and then how do you sort of get the most out of your people. And the latter then is I guess in like I'm definitely a believer in the servant leadership thinking, which I guess necessarily doesn't apply to all businesses, all industries, all professions. But I think for software developers, especially in high value add organizations like sort of product organizations, and increasingly I think with the coming of like AI tools, etc., I think more and more, software developers as well are, well, not even just like knowledge workers or thought workers, but creative workers. I think they need like sort of support as creative workers in their lead. They need somebody to, provide the holy trinity, to figure out mastery, purpose, and autonomy, right? And
Can you repeat it again? Trinity?
Mastery,
Yeah.
purpose, and autonomy.
Yeah. That's nice.
And it's almost like kind of like the Maslow pyramid for actually for anybody, sort of anyone's self actualization. But yeah, so on the latter side, I have a personal like an anecdote or personal experience from Wise when I was building up and structuring and staffing the platform team, and that was my first experience as a lead. When people in my basically, let's put it this way, when I where I understood what people in my team were doing, but I definitely was in no place like in a kind of I couldn't come from a place of like knowledge or experience,
yes.
to go in as like a professional mentor and advise them.
Got it.
Right. I could try and like coach or maybe like advise them on like kind of like I don't know like how to prioritize or get stuff done, or maybe based on our shared goals and company values, how to think about this or that. But I definitely couldn't, go and help them do their work, right? I just couldn't, right?
Yes.
Not that I should or shouldn't, I just couldn't. And I think that was actually like a really interesting exercise in like, figuring out like, am I actually useful? Like, am I able to help you guys somehow?
What were the lessons learned?
I think one was simply that I think for myself, I discovered that this sort of like coaching leadership style really is for me. And I think in these situations, that's pretty much like the only thing that that you can do.
So you saw yourself as a multiplier by coaching, right? People giving maybe different perspectives, asking questions.
Yeah, also, but also obviously, like there's some sort of like an admin and visioneering and sort of like some sort of like an overarching layer that I probably could, I hopefully added value spending time on. But yeah, effectively, it was this understanding that that's the occasion when you really sort of need to help people look into themselves for the answers.
Did you have to think about the team composition? Because as engineering lead in Pactum, sometimes what I find is that you can hire the best people, like with the best skills, but in the end, it's about how people work together and can they work together effectively. And for you to arrange the work in such a way where people love working with each other, they will blend, there will be synergy, right? But I wonder, what's your experience?
That's a super good question, and I need to be honest. That's something I'm not good at. I mean, like I fully understand, sort of understand the matter, right? But that's something that's never come to me like naturally or easily. And I've also made quite a lot of like sort of staffing mistakes in terms of even like promotions.
But it's a mistake in hindsight, right? But it's very hard sometimes to.
Yeah. True. But like I guess also like that's actually something I wish I had a bit more. Just kind of like intuition, I guess, in that regard. But hopefully just I've maybe learned to.
But I asked about this team composition because I think maybe it's a. Oh, sorry, I interrupted. Maybe you
no, you didn't.
Something. Okay. Regarding team composition, because I thought as a segue to Grünfin, you had to, as a CTO, right? You had to hire people, and you didn't have like a lot of headcount, right? It's just a matter of 2, 3, 4. I don't know how many you can count. You can comment engineers, and you had to pick wisely, right? So I wonder what was the thinking process?
Yeah.
How to assemble a good team?
Although I'd really love it to be otherwise, I think you're making it much more pompous and methodical.
It was kind of, oh, this guy I know is available. Oh.
So the first hire wrote to me himself the day after we made the announcement that we're building Grünfin.
I think I know who you talk about.
Yeah, the second person actually wrote to me himself as well
Nice.
on
So
LinkedIn.
people
I
come
guess.
to you. That's good. Yeah.
And then the third one we sort of properly like hired with the help of an agency and.
Right.
And parted ways a little bit later. Just kind of
Right.
didn't fit too well. But I think, like, to your point though. I guess when you're only starting, and like I definitely got super lucky with the first two engineers. I think that's obviously like something to keep an eye out for. That even if you don't aspire towards some sort of like a magical puzzle, then at least you obviously screen people for their first of all the same abilities, that they should be like independent and happy to figure things out and work in sort of volatile environments and in the work in the unknown, and obviously also in general, like, should be people who are fun to be around of and just overall like sociable to a certain extent.
The ultimate question is, do you want to work with this person every day?
Exactly. And like whenever, like if it's a small team, like there's there's no hiding.
Yes. Yes.
So I think in that scale, it's not really even that much of a question.
What were your main lessons from Grünfin? Because I think it's worth paying tribute to it, because I think the mission was very good, and I'm sure you probably partially or not partially continued in Lightyear, because it's still about investing and sensible investing. But about Grünfin, what are your main lessons as a founder, as engineering lead? Maybe you can talk about it from different perspectives that you could share.
Sure. We haven't done like some sort of like an official or joint founder retro on that. So
Postmortem.
Obviously postmortem, exactly. So these are like heavily subjective, and I hope if my co-founders end up listening to Vitali's podcast, they'll forgive me. But I'm obviously like it's not in the sense of pointing fingers or something. It's rather like a sort of a collective thing. Anyway. So as a founder, I think, and this is not related with tech at all, but there might be some similarities to technical or architectural decisions. I think we were confident enough as seasoned executives and professionals that we would be able to get the license, which is almost as hard as a banking license to get. That we would build a product that works and we like sort of all the nuts and bolts are in place and all the numbers add up in the end. That we went ahead and just did that first. And in hindsight, we probably could have started from some good old customer development or customer research. No, anyway, I think we just we started off a little bit too big, not even in terms of like the team, but just in terms of like capital expenditure and just having a bit more time to just grow and starting to make revenue and not having the burden of running a regulated investment firm might have taken us to a different place. I think that maybe is kind of like modern, pretty fundamental bit even.
It's like the burn rate was too fast, but the product market fit was not yet there.
But yeah, I think that's roughly one way to put it. Yes, and I think obviously they're easy to put out like 2, 3, 4 more things that if done differently might have had an impact on the bottom line.
What are you proud of from Grünfin? Everything you built?
Definitely proud of the same, that we built the product itself in the end wasn't like super complicated compared with like a full-blown brokerage, for instance. But on the other hand, we built a product that carried a lot of responsibility. We had something that's called an omnibus license. So basically, that means that very many starting investment services run off somebody else's infrastructure or Rails, which means that if they onboard a customer, they actually need to onboard the customer to that partner as well. And then that partner is responsible for saying basically who has how much of X, Y, and Z. So we had that permit ourselves. So basically, we knew that Grünfin has X customers. In total, they own Y units of that ETF and Z of that. And this much belongs to Vitaly, and that much belongs to Peter and Paul. And so
you didn't run through intermediary.
Yeah, I mean, like we did the trades, obviously, like through a brokerage. But anyway, like we were allowed to keep that ledger, and we were like audited for 3 years in a row without a glitch. So in that sense, we got the financial maths right. And the other thing that we're pretty proud of is that I think we really met our customer or sort of like kind of key customer segments needs in terms of just general look and feel and UX and the overall vibe. We had quite a lot of
I have friends who used to report it and were very happy.
And we had quite many customers who were first-time investors. We had quite many customers who definitely were not these sort of like super confident active investors, rather the opposite. And they all felt it's like a really nice balance.
And it aligned with their values, right? They wanted to invest in something sustainable.
Exactly.
But they, again, wanted to...
And they necessarily didn't want to bother figuring out what that means. Sounds a bit sort of...
But they trusted that you figured it out.
Exactly. And I think that we did figure it out in a pretty decent way. And overall, like the third thing to be proud of, almost 99% of our portfolios made a profit when we sold them.
Cannot be told about all the platforms, right? Like in Robinhood, they're like
well, I mean, like there are really many very successful investment platforms trading in CFDs who have to publicly say in small print that 75% of customers lose money. It's insane. But 98.5% of ours gain money. So.
And that's very respectable and cool.
It was definitely a fun journey, and I'm really happy to continue good parts of it in Lightyear. So,
can you comment what made you join Lightyear?
I think there's one thing is exactly this. It wasn't my main motivation when looking for the next role, but it definitely helped. But the big one was just talent density, and I think though so there's definitely an aspect of knowing a lot of people who already have been building Lightyear for a good while.
Also many XYZers, right?
Exactly, and that's why I know them. But that's that's just how I know that they're great people. So I think that's really like number one. And then yes, it helps that it's pretty well aligned with what we were trying to do with Grünfin. And I really felt that it's also just a really good time to join the company, simply because, as I already told somebody who asked like on my first week, so how's it going? I said, well, great people, everything's up and to the right, everything's messy and broken. So it's just the way I like it.
What is your take on this active versus passive investment? So definitely, like, and again, I don't want to ask any provocative questions, so feel free to answer in a, let's say, your safe space how you wish to. But there are many questions like, will Lightyear become like or not the second like Robinhood, right? Where the incentives are for people to trade more actively because the platform could make money out of it. What is Lightyear's philosophy on it, and how Lightyear kind of tries to align its values so it kind of tries to reward for itself the right incentives so that the company moves in the right direction?
So Lightyear's motto is creating successful investors. The 75% of provider X customers who lose money trading CFDs definitely are not successful investors. So successful investors can come in many ways, but and over time, I'm sure Lightyear as well is going to broaden our product offering. Maybe not only in terms of expanding the instrument universe, which certainly we're constantly doing as well, but also in terms of just basically fulfilling different use cases for customers who, for some reason, maybe either are not comfortable enough, maybe it's not sort of passive enough for them or whatnot. So we definitely look to reach more customers. But I just come back to it's literally about like creating more successful investors. So whether that's investors who are more successful or whether that's people who are not yet investors and should become investors, I think both are on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice. And can you comment on what are the main, maybe even like, because from product, it's one thing, but since it's an engineering focused podcast, what are the main engineering challenges in Lightyear or right now that you maybe observed? Or that
I think I think if maybe I can just draw out like one big one. So so even if we compare with Wise, well, at least like a few years back, people definitely do expect their money to reach from A to B quickly and transparently, et cetera, et cetera. And overall, I think Wise is doing an excellent job at that. However, that's a part of getting decent, up-to-date currency rates. It's not a real-time business, whereas brokerage is like sort of a nearly a real-time business in terms of people's expectations.
Okay.
And day-to-day customers are coming back to ask like, okay, so like, why did I get this exact rate on my trade? And we need to have an answer for that.
Okay.
Because that's in that sense, it's a bit of a different ball game. And then when you sort of kind of like multiply that with scale, there's quite a lot of really exciting tech problems to be solved as we grow, both in sort of breadth and depth and.
Yeah. And I just want to say, if on the UI UX, just my comment, because I'm Lightyear user, your Flutter app is really snappy and really good. I think the technology choice kind of turned out well, probably in a sense that it does its job. But I wonder, what's your take on Flutter as the platform? Kind of, does it have potential? Do you think it will grow? Any opinions here?
Yeah, I'm definitely not the right person to ask, to be honest. There was actually, if your listeners want to look back, I think that was like a year and a half ago, there was a Dev Club episode where Lightyear Flutter guy Alar gave a presentation on how Lightyear does Flutter and thinks about it. So
on Dev Club.
Yeah. On Dev Club, yeah. I think it was the English Dev Club.
Yep.
So yeah, I wouldn't expect that thinking to have changed much. So definitely we're still on Flutter, and yeah. So it feels like so far it's been like a decent enough way to just ship across platforms, and might be one time when we're bigger and stronger and it's worthwhile, actually having different app teams. Who knows?
Got it. Before we wrap up, I want to ask 2 more questions, the main ones. In the context of today's LLMs, and they say LLMs are going to take engineering jobs. I'm always laughing when someone says that. What would be your advice because I think we know how to navigate this space with LLMs and other things. It's about solving problems. What would be your recommendation for those who start out their career? What to focus on? What skills to focus on? Those, let's say, high school students, in their bachelor years and in universities who want to build a career in IT. What would be your recommendation to them? What to focus on?
One thing that I think it's moved so fast that my opinion might be obsolete like in a few weeks' time. But like so far, still it seems, from as much as I have followed on social media and YouTube and so on, that that AI, just like the overall no-code movement, maybe like a couple of years back, AI and the AI tools have become literally the super amazing prototyping tools, stuff that allow you to get something out of the door. Might be even in the form of like an actual MVP that somebody pays money for. I think there is still a way to go, until we actually start building scalable, large-scale systems with AI, which I think is, I even don't know whether that's like too important, or like that goes to the territory like whether there's any point in learning software development or something. I definitely think that there is. But I do think that means two things. One is that it's definitely worth understanding at any point in time how the LLMs, any other AI tools can help you, and also understanding how they cannot help you, or like what the pitfalls are. And I think just in terms of it, like examples, and this probably, as the models specialize and so on and so forth, this probably will improve. But so far, if you just take like something like ChatGPT and ask it to write you some, I don't know, like some code in your favorite framework, it easily might be like one version behind from what you're using, and you even might not know, just because it's just not the way it kind of like sort of thinks. So that's, anyway, thinking about how it can help you, and then really like kind of that also brings out the flip side. So if you understand how the AI does not help you yet, then maybe worth in building these traits that then would make us really good future software developers. And there's actually quite a lot sort of remaining. There's still bigger architectural questions, scaling questions, just understanding customer research, customer empathy and intuition, and so forth, and so on and so forth. So yeah, there's a lot that we can.
Yeah, I agree with you. And for me, it's also, I think, actually, never before it was so relevant. I mean, it was always relevant, but even now, especially for engineers to understand how to tackle complexity and ever-growing complexity. And it's about both scalability, but also cognitive complexity. Like you need to build, and whether you use LLMs or not doesn't matter. Your system grows, and you need to be able to manage that. And for that, you need to know patterns in software engineering, how to manage that. And then, of course, if you know the words, or you know the correct terminology, and you know how to apply different tools, then you can, of course, work together with LLMs to build it out. But you have to still know. You have to still have a deep knowledge on that. So I view it almost as the following: that LLM just helps you with a faster feedback loop, because it's like from your thought to your intent to finishing it became faster, but you still have to kind of be the main architect of this. And I don't think this is going away, at least in few years. Because I think with smaller things, definitely it will automate a lot of things. Like front end, we already see v0.dev or other things. Declarative front end, other simple things, like this can do it very well. But managing complexity, I think this is why fundamental skills like domain-driven design will be useful. Exactly, all the product engineering things you talk about. But even I thought about it, even TDD or test-driven development. And the reason is, with LLMs, you will want to make sure that it does what you want to do. What's the best way for you to verify if it does what you want to do? Is to write machine runnable spec, right? Which is a test. And then the cool thing is that if you run a test, and you can run it in different level of abstraction, you can run a high-level test, end-to-end test. You can write integration test or unit test, doesn't matter. And then you tell LLM, fill it in, like make it implement this, right? And then if your test goes green, then either with LLM or without, you can start refactoring, you can play around, but you have the safety net. You have a framework to work on. And this is why I think this kind of focusing on testing, on tackling complexity, and yes, on a business side, product engineering will make a difference.
Exactly, and I do think that people, like, sort of, this is super broad statement, but I do think people should be thinking more in their day-to-day work, how could the tools available to me already help me more.
Absolutely.
And definitely that's something we as software developers shouldn't be afraid of either, right? Like
yes, we should embrace them.
Exactly. And then that's what sort of for lack of a better metaphor, like that's what allows us to stay on top of the heap, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think LLMs will help with. I thought about it. I think they can help. I was just watching, by the way, the conference. There was a panel discussion of Martin Fowler, Dave Farley, the kind of dinosaurs from, and they were also talking about where it goes next. And Martin Fowler made a good point. He said, LLMs can help us with better understanding the context. Like if I change this thing here, how else will it affect the system somewhere? And yes, maybe in 5% LLM will hallucinate, but in 95% it might give you good pointers. And the more it parses the whole data, the whole code base or code bases, right? If we talk about microservices, it might help you out because it will read documentation, it will read all the context. But yes, I also view it as a tool that we should harness and we should just learn and embrace.
Pro tip, by the way, to all the developers who use Shell a lot for whatever reason. I recently, by suggestion from a colleague, started using Warp terminal on Mac. Warp as in warp drive, from Star Trek. Yeah. And it's got a native integration with, I think you can even use other models, but I think by default it uses Claude. And what's cool about it is that basically there's like there's a pairing. It's called pairing. There's a pairing hotkey, and effectively, like otherwise, it just behaves as a shell. But if you hit the hotkey, you can just ask stuff or ask it to do stuff, and that's
hopefully without system permissions.
But that's what's that's what I really it saved me a lot of time. Just I was onboarding. We use just a random example. We use ASDF in Lightyear for package and sort of kind of dependency management. Anyway, like SDKs and stuff. And first time I saw it, so literally I had some just installed something. It failed with a funny whatever issue, and so hey Warp, how do we solve this? And then it gives you perfectly reasoned this and that. Whenever it wants to execute something, it kind of okay, well, I think we should run this. Hit enter if okay.
Oh, did it? What context did it have in mind? Your
just my not my file system necessarily, but just my history. Basically the session. And it literally step by step walked me through the issue, something that otherwise probably would just have taken me 15 minutes of just browsing documentation and stuff. Anyway, just speaking of useful tools, definitely recommended.
Yeah. Thanks. I have the last one. What's your recommended reading or resources for engineers that at least affected you?
I've been such a lazy reader recently that it's almost embarrassing.
It could be something you read 10 years ago or 20. It doesn't have to be the recent one. But something you think is worthwhile, at least considering.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question almost, but sometime when I was working in Swedbank, I think that was in the bank library somewhere, but basically it was the first sort of RESTful APIs, not it was O'Reilly's, series, and it was this thick. And I had a team in Riga back then, so I read it, on the bus back and forth, and I was mind blown, this HTTP protocol's got so much in it, why aren't we using this magical beast?
Much better than SOAP, right?
Much better than SOAP, exactly. I actually read a Corba book, if anybody knows what Corba is.
No, I don't know.
Well,
I'm too young.
Don't read up on Corba, anybody. Sure. So, no, anyway, but that's, so it's sort of about, revelations that 20 years later maybe sound a bit silly. But no, really, yeah. I really like the, damn it, I can't remember there was a recent Martin Fowler book, super thin.
Well, there's Tidy First, which is super thin, but I can't.
I think it. Now I confuse Fowler and Beck.
Tidy First.
Tidy First was actually quite nice, just because it was so so concise.
Yeah, 100 pages.
It was super concise and super.
And it's good, right? It talks about the trade-offs and different costs.
Yeah, totally, exactly. And I think another one which I quite liked is there's this Pragmatic Programmer newsletter.
By Gergely.
Yeah. I've quite enjoyed
I
his
like
stuff
it as well. Yeah. He talks about very relevant topics.
Yeah, exactly, and it's like sort of broader and wider. You know, it's not just technical; it's also like self-development, and then sometimes anyway, compensation, and there's been quite a lot. What else? Actually, this is again like sort of out of the box, but I've been a long time reader of the Wired magazine.
Wired,
yeah, and definitely not really not about coding necessarily, but it's been a really good like quality journalism take on. Effectively, it's like a tech magazine, but it oftentimes talks about technology in very like human ways, or mostly just about like the impact it has on people.
But kind of had a breadth, right?
Yes, and I think what I appreciate about it is exactly that it's really sort of provides perspective and gives new angles to think about things.
Nice, thanks. Anything else you want to mention at the end?
No, not really. Not really. I think just coming back to the intro bit, maybe I think the coolest. It's cool to think about things that I've had luck to have participated building in, but what sort of I guess like tickles me more is the great acquaintances I've made along the way. So thanks for inviting me, Tali.
Absolutely. And thanks, Alvar. It's an honor to have a podcast episode with you. Yeah, thanks. All right.